Hey, everybody, it's BP, and it's time for another breakdown on the Storm Surge podcast. Today, we're talking overtime. A lot of people have things to say about it. I've read some of the social media commentary, and most of the opinions that I've seen are garbage. So I'm not going to get too far into that, other than, hey, guys, maybe do a little homework. Maybe actually have a thought process before you just comment things like, this is why the UFL sucks. Not going to address that. What I will address is this, though, is the setup of the overtime period and why I tentatively agree with it. I'm not 100% behind it, but let me tell you why it's better than what we have, and then go into the strange finish in Orlando and Louisville, that 29-27 victory, question mark. Even I still have questions at the end. But nonetheless, overtime has been a contentious issue in football at any level, especially when you get into the higher levels of FBS football and the NFL. So the college game didn't used to have overtime until I believe it was 1997. I could be wrong on that one, but it was in the late 90s that they started instituting overtime because of games like the Choke It Doke in 1994, one of the greatest college football comebacks in the history of fourth quarters that ever were, one of the greatest games between Florida State and Florida, where the Gators come into town. Steve Spurrier's team has got the Noles on their heels at 31-3. And then all of a sudden, you have this massive comeback, and the Noles tie the game. Bobby Bowden goes for the extra point, doesn't take the 2-point conversion, wants to get at least the tie because that set up the fifth quarter in the French Quarter. Wonderful setup. But anyway, so they instituted overtime, and the college decision was to stray away from the NFL, obviously, to differentiate, because the NFL overtime used to be kind of boring. It was all determined by the coin toss, and the first team to possess the ball, get in field goal range, kick a field goal, you're done. Literally sudden death. But the complaint is that the college game had it a little bit more exciting because at least both teams got to possess the ball. But then down the line, as teams got better, you started seeing the overtime periods get longer and longer. So now you got a fourth overtime and a fifth overtime, and it started becoming X overtime. I think the record might be 7. So the college game, staying with that Kansas overtime format, ball on the 25, everybody gets to possess the ball thing. Then they started tweaking the rules. So after a certain overtime, now you're going to go for 2. And then after the third overtime, you're going to have to start doing this 2-point conversion shootout, which everybody laughs and says, well, the game went to penalty kicks. But in an attempt to shorten the game, because they've already played 2.5, 3, sometimes 3.5 hours of football, you got to have a winner at some point, and this game has got to end. And that's the point. The game must end with a clear winner. So I want you to focus on that point. The NFL, to their credit, tried to do something different with their overtime and at least tweaked it to where both teams had a potential to possess the ball, but then they had that touchdown or safety rule that you can see the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills game that came from. And that just a controversy in general. It was so upsetting as a Chiefs fan to listen to Buffalo fans whine about that, because you know what the rule was. You knew what the confines that you had to operate under, and Kansas City took advantage of it, scored the first touchdown, game over. Sorry, you lose. Now the NFL tweaked their overtime rules again because the fans whined about it. And somehow, I don't think the NFL listened to it, so much the fan whining, as they reevaluated the competition in general. But nonetheless, whining is not going to work with the UFL, guys. They're not going to listen to you just because you said it on social media, okay? I think they have evolved past that. But anyway, let's get into the United Football League and their overtime setup. So they took the best of both worlds from the college game and some of the NFL action and realized that a clear winner must be made. Okay, you have to finish this game. So what they did is they took the exchange of possession concept. Everybody gets to possess the ball, but they did that 3 tries in the best of 6 or something like that, whatever it is. Everybody gets 3 shots at it, and whoever scores the most 2-point conversions in that period wins. If not, they go to sudden death, and they play until there's a winner.
I said, hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right.
So yeah, I felt the same way. Hold on, wait a minute, something's not right here. So we go through all of this. Now we're going to sudden death. How long is this going to take, right? Now, bear in mind, Orlando had already had an opportunity to convert from the 1-yard line. They started this at the 5, and then Louisville got flagged for a defensive pass interference penalty. Of course, they're raising their hands going, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Pay attention to that part. That matters. Orlando tries from the 1 yard line, doesn't work. So when it's all said and done, we've had our 3 attempts, and now we go to sudden death and back and forth and back and forth. Now, there was one of these conversion calls where Benny Snell made a catch in the end zone, but because his big old toes were on that white line, and I do agree with the officials on this one, that was heads up to see that. You need just this much to get on that line to be considered out of bounds. And they were right. So Snell's out of bounds, incomplete pass. Louisville fans are already pissed at this point. The officiating crew is not helping them out, it seems. So we get to the final conversion. Orlando throws a pass. There was an obvious hold. It wasn't pass interference. It was holding, right? So they grabbed a jersey. It's a flag. Now, the rule is, and Dean Blandino, again, did an excellent job of explaining this to the folks at home. I'm sure the people on the, in the stands didn't get this. So, but if you go back and watch it, the ruling is that if a team in the entirety of the overtime series commits a live foul, a defensive team, right? They commit a first one, it's like a gimme. It's like in basketball when they say you have a foul to give, right? The second one automatically results in a 2-point conversion call for the offense. So think of it like this. If a offensive team in their own end zone commits a holding penalty, there's a flag on the play, and it results in a safety. So it's the same logic. The defense can commit one live ball foul. After that, if they commit a second one, it results in a 2-point conversion, no matter if they make it or not, right? So that's what had happened. The reason behind that is because of that clear and definitive winner. If Orlando gets the penalty, they move the ball to the 1 yard line and they fail, right? Then possession goes right back to Louisville and it goes back and forth until somebody eventually wins the game. So what that does is that prevents a team from constantly getting a flag called to prevent otherwise what would be a catch, because they're on the 5 yard line. If it's from the 2 yard line to the 1 yard line, it's like, okay, whatever. But they start on the 5 yard line. So there's a little bit of a disadvantage. And more often than not, teams are going to pass the ball to go for these 2-point conversions. In this instance, they decided, the 5 yard line would be better. So, the first flag, they put them on the 1 yard line, and that could wash, rinse, repeat. You could have guys just continually foul to stop because there's no penalty per se for continuously getting, pass interference calls or holding penalties. So invariably, if a guy gets beat, all he's got to do is grab a jersey, get a flag, they reset, your defense steps up, they stop him, and we keep going and going. And then it becomes the Energizer Bunny. We don't stop, right? So they've already gotten 3 possessions each. They failed. Now that we're into our 4th, our 5th one. How many more of these are you going to do until you get a definitive end to the game? So the UFL decided, listen, that's not worth it. We're going to stop it when we can in a technical way, although it seems odd and it seems very, very not entertaining to have a game end that way. The game ends, right? The fans are pissed, right? Most of them that are not well informed and are not actually taking a thought process here. They're just going, or immediately keyboard warriors, Kermit the Frogging their way through typing their hatred of something that they probably didn't like to begin with. But nonetheless, when you rationally look at this, okay, this is a spring league. It's not amateur, it's professional. These guys have either played at the next level or played at a high enough level of college football that they've got the talent, but they haven't made these NFL rosters. And by design, this league is supposed to get them to the next level, okay? That's the whole purpose why they exist. And it's also football in the springtime. Who would not want football all year round? Not this guy, because it keeps me very entertained and very busy. But nonetheless, it's a spring league, and their goal is to move up to the next level. What service is a league doing to them if they put them in situations where the risk of injury increases exponentially beyond the confines of the game itself? Playing football is a risk, and they know that. But if you're in a situation where you can prevent some of that, meaning that your average football game for them, they want that to be about a 2.5 hour game. They want these games to go quickly because they don't want people's attention getting, lost after a while. They want people engaged. They want it fast moving because they know people's attention spans are like this. So the game has to end. So that's one reason. But the other one is, why would you continually put a guy at risk? Because fatigue will play a factor in getting a guy injured more so than contact. The more you exert yourself, the less likely you are to have, smart plays. You start getting silly after a while when you're fatigued. And you start pushing yourself because you need to finish this game, and you're going to take bigger risks, and it's not going to work out for you getting hurt. And the last thing that these guys want is for them to get seriously hurt in a situation where they could have done something to mitigate that. What service are you doing to these guys who are trying to make it to the next level? And now you've not only shut down their opportunity for the league, but maybe you've shut them down for football altogether. Could you imagine the flack that the UFL would get if these guys were put on the field and then were suddenly subject to career-ending injuries because the league didn't put protections in place to mitigate some of that? Yes, football is an inherently violent and an inherently dangerous game. But what service is that to put a guy in a situation where he could get hurt by long drives, long overtime periods beyond what a normal guy is conditioned for? It makes absolutely no sense. So I think the league is smart for doing that. They're protecting their players. And Blandino did say this too. It's a player safety issue. The average fan that's commenting right now saying, well, this is why you guys aren't a legitimate league and blah, blah, blah. Look at the NFL roster at the beginning of the season and look at it about 6 weeks in. Is your favorite player on the sideline sidelined with injury because they've spent all of this time playing in football games and practicing and subjecting themselves, putting their bodies on the line, and now they're broken? And now they sit on injured reserve and they don't come back out? Tua Tagovailoa, great example. Guy gets a concussion. How long did he sit? And the Miami Dolphins have sucked since, and then they got rid of him. What a bust. How much of that could the Dolphins have prevented, or the league have prevented, if they had done just enough within the confines of football to put a quarterback in a situation where they don't have to be subjected to that? I've been in plenty of contact sports myself, but I've played in contact sports where I could look up and, at a recreational level at the very least, and at a competitive level too. And I've been able to look at a situation and go, that's not really safe for me. I should probably protect my knees. I should probably protect my joints because I have a long career ahead of me and I want to continue doing this. In football, for whatever reason, we just want these guys to be gladiators and just beat the hell out of each other. And God forbid they give up their lives for us in the gridiron. That's stupid. That's a terrible mentality. So is the UFL right for doing this? Yes, I tentatively agree with the sentiment behind the rule. Does the overtime rule need to change a little bit? I would say yes, but I need a bit more evidence before I could come up with a plausible solution. Because like I said, this has only happened once this season, and it really hasn't happened often enough. These games really haven't gotten competitive to go to overtime to where this becomes necessary. So, with that being said, should they tweak things? Yes. At the end of the season, I think this should come up for a slight bit of review, because ending a game like that, not exactly the best concept, but I agree with the spirit of what they're trying to do to get a definitive winner and to just end the overtime period. But from the fans' perspective, I don't think we should let the officials finish this off. The players should do it. But at the same time, I would rather have those guys come back next week and compete than to hear somebody's football career has ended because we were greedy and irresponsible with how we treated them. I'm BP, and that's another breakdown. Fight back.